This is my Vilano Hybrid bike. I ordered it off Amazon 7 years ago and outfitted it with some fenders and a cargo rack. The total cost for the bike and accessories was just under $300, so you know this is a cheap bike. Now 7 years later, the bike has developed a new problem. When I'd pedal, there'd be a subtle thunk in the crank area every revolution. Researching the problem online said the bottom bracket bearings were failing. This would be the first time I'd remove a crank to replace a bottom bracket. To replace the bottom bracket on my Vilano Hybrid bike, I need a tool set to remove the 3-piece crank set and bottom bracket from the square tapered setup with a 20-tooth spline. Thanks to numerous videos online how to do this, it wasn't too hard to jump on this task, but there were some steps where I scratched my head for a bit. To start, the dust cover and outer crank bolts needed to be removed. These are held in by an 8mm Allen key. Ideally, I'd have an 8mm Allen key drive bit to use with my ratchet set in the future, but this wrench worked fine for removing the bolts. With the two outer bolts off, the next step is to use the crank removal tool to wedge the crank arms off. The shorter and wider black plug threads into each crank arm, and the mandrel threads into the plug to push the crank arm off the bottom bracket.
Got it.
I found the supplied spanner with the tool set a bit weak, so I grabbed a 5/8 inch open-headed wrench to do my torquing. It took me a few tries to realize I wasn't cranking hard enough with the mandrel to force the crank off. I was afraid of breaking something.
Yay.
But after a few attempts and lubricating with Tri-Flow,
Got it, baby.
I managed to remove both arms. To note with this tool, installation and removal is standard right-hand threading.
That's excellent.
For the bottom bracket, the holders are embedded with a 20-tooth spline.
It's kind of a cool
The tool set came with a special fitting for this. For torquing this fitting, the tool set also had an adapter for the Allen key to make it act as a 1/2-inch drive. I'd rather use a ratchet for this, but the provided tool worked. On the drive side, right if you're facing forward, the threads for the bottom bracket are reverse threaded, so you have to turn the drive to the right to loosen it. These holders came out easier than the crank arms.
It's a 120.
With the bottom bracket removed, I could see the correct measurement of the bottom bracket for this bike. Unfortunately, it was the same length as one of the ones I purchased, the 120mm length one. The bottom brackets are inexpensive, so if this new one breaks, it won't be the end of the world. Also to note, because of the threading, the bottom bracket is unidirectional, so it only fits one way. The bottom bracket for this frame is a Shimano BB UN300 equivalent. Looking over the bike and the readings,
You know, this wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
This made sense given the gear set on this bike is Shimano. Thank goodness for a standardized system. The new bottom bracket goes in just as the old one came out. Before installing, I hit the threads with some red and tacky grease for the anti-seize properties. I installed the bottom bracket holder on the left side first. Then inserted the unit to the drive side and tightened that down. I don't have torque specs for this, so I just went hand tight on both sides. For reinstalling the crank arms, this I needed to check what I needed to do and if I needed another tool. It turns out you use the 8mm Allen head bolts to force and secure the arms back onto the taper. I put the left side crank arm first and tightened the bolt down as far as I could by hand. Again, this is without a torque wrench or any specs.
That's probably good enough. That doesn't look like it's going anywhere.
The drive side, after reattaching the chain and lining the arm to 180 degrees of the other side, it's not really too hard to mess this up. It's a square taper.
Yeah, that's how it should go, right? Now, this wasn't intuitive to me, like, okay, how do I put it back on? And I watched the video, it's like, just use the dust cover and torque to tighten it. So this dust cover is a little loose now after first removal, but I think it'll be okay. Oh, torque. Okay, that's probably good.
And that was it. I test rode the bike, and there was no more clunking. This wasn't too bad to do. I hope this video helps someone else who bought a bike like this and needs to make some repairs or upgrades.
greensandmachines.com